there is no ceasefire on offer from Hamas. That's the problem with your position. There's no ceasefire on offer. So if there's no ceasefire, there's no negotiations.
Let us sort of consider the merit of a ceasefire in this particular context, and to add to that, the impact that this is having on the Labour Party. John, is this a real split in the Labour Party, a real fundamental divide that is, going to prove particularly difficult to navigate?
Look, it's a fundamental fantasy there could be a ceasefire. Terrorists have to agree to a ceasefire. When we had a ceasefire in Northern Ireland, it was between the IRA and the UK. That's the reality. Unless Hamas want a ceasefire, there is no ceasefire possible in Gaza. So it's not even a hypothetical conversation. It's one that's talking about a kind of different world that doesn't exist.
Okay. James, what would you say to that?
Well, it's not true. There needs to be a ceasefire. We've already had 8,000 people killed in Gaza, over 3,000 children. And the reason why a call for a ceasefire is so overwhelmingly supported in the country and in most countries on earth is because it's so obviously the right thing to do. You cannot respond to the unjustifiable killing of a group of children with killing many, many, many more children. There is no justification whatsoever for the crimes that are being committed now against the Palestinian people in Gaza and also beyond. And that's why we are calling for a ceasefire. And it's particularly important in Britain because Britain is a strong diplomatic ally of Israel, and we also provide them with weaponry. So if Britain were to change course and were to say that there needs to be a ceasefire, that Israel does not have carte blanche for its actions in Gaza, then that could have a real material impact. It could save lives. And that's why it's such an important issue. It's not a question of this Labour Party faction or that Labour Party faction. We're talking about people's lives.
And John, how would you respond to that then? What would you say to James, who says that simply the right thing to do is to call for a ceasefire?
Look, the right thing to do is for Hamas to disarm and to hand over the hostages. How can Israel get back the hostages, who are the people who weren't murdered on October the 7th, but are being kidnapped? Quite how that can be done by calling a ceasefire that allows a break, a time for Hamas to regroup, to get rearmed, get resupplied. That's the practical, pragmatic side of it. Is that I do not question anyone who wants to see a humanitarian ceasefire, who wants to see the killing stop, who wants to see the bombing stop. But a ceasefire requires two sides. And of all the people in the world, the United Kingdom, who with the Balfour Declaration started the complexity in the Middle East, and then with the Sykes-Picot, and then with the Palestinian Mandate, the United Kingdom has no part to play in Israel-Palestine apart from supporting the actors who can actually create lasting peace. And the only actor that can really have any effect on Israel, as we've seen in the last fortnight, the Americans, and President Biden has done a very good job, and the people to whose line one should cleave and stick. It's not Labour sticking to the UK government. Labour should be sticking to President Biden's line.
James, I just want to focus on the Labour Party for the next couple of minutes.
Sure, but can I just respond to one thing that John just said about the hostages, because it isn't true. You're far more likely to save the lives of the hostages through a ceasefire and negotiation. That's why families of the hostages met with Benjamin Netanyahu, the Israeli Prime Minister, this week, asking for there to not be...
There is no ceasefire on offer from Hamas. That's the problem with your position. There's no ceasefire on offer. So if there's no ceasefire, there's no negotiations. If there's no...
hang on, John.
I understand the feeling behind what you're saying, but it's also... It's impossible to negotiate.
No, I'm afraid, John, mine doesn't just have feeling and moral purpose. It is also practically the thing to do in two ways. Firstly, if you want to get back the hostages, which is absolutely what should happen, that will happen via negotiation, which can't happen while Gaza is being razed to rubble. And if you want a long-term solution that provides security to Israelis, it requires justice for the Palestinians. This is an occupied people for decades. In Gaza, they live in an open-air prison camp, which is currently being bombed to rubble. Now, if you are not able to to be statesperson and seek peace, then they're
UK has
failing
no
their
role.
own people.
The UK has no role in this.
So
The UK arms.
let me just
No,
jump
we
in.
don't.
Let me just jump
We
in,
don't.
both of you.
Actually,
Both of
we
you.
literally
Hello.
don't.
Hi
They're
there. Hi.
it's
Hello.
orchestrated.
Hi. I'm just going to jump in because it's a really interesting sort of zoomed out discussion. But I do want to
You wanna
focus
zoom in?
I do want to zoom in, John. Exactly. I want to zoom in on the Labour Party's difficulty with this issue. And James, I want to get your take first of all on why there is a split. Why is there not consensus on this within the Labour Party? And is that a problem for Sir Keir Starmer? James.
There's a split because the Labour leadership wants to tuck in behind the government, which wants to tuck in behind the US. It's isolated in the world in supporting the continuing war crimes that we're seeing in Gaza. The reason why some MPs don't support that position is because they are being lobbied overwhelmingly by their constituents. 76%, this is a poll from 10 days ago, it's almost certainly more now, who want to see a ceasefire. That's why there is a split in position, because the position that the overwhelming majority of British people have, which is in favour of a ceasefire, isn't being represented by the leadership of either of our two main parties.
John?
I reckon that 100% of people in Britain want to see peace in Israel, Palestine, Israel, in Gaza at the moment. That's not on offer. That is not on the table. There definitely are people in the Labour Party, a lot of people, who want to see, they want to see the war stop. That is not a thing that the Labour Party leadership can have any impact or any control of, and it's not anything that anybody apart from the US can control. And as James said, Labour are supporting President Biden and the US line on this, and that has been the best thing to actually ameliorate the desires of Netanyahu to act quickly and more forcefully.
We've got about 30 seconds, so I just want to ask John: does Keir Starmer look weaker now than he's ever looked before?
No, he's got a 20-point lead in the polls. He looks stronger than he's ever done before. He came out of conference strength, and there will be debates.